Last week, we didn't jump into the Rogan Spotify debate. Maybe we should have, but we'll talk about it now with a lot more context. Obviously, Neil Young and some other folks that were pulling our music off, Joni Mitchell, whatever. Some actual high-profile bloggers said they don't want to be on there. And then Joe Rogan and Daniel Ek both decided to talk about this. Joe Rogan said, listen, I'm a comedian. I don't prepare for these interviews, and I just see where they go. But this show has gotten very influential. It's the number one podcast in the world. It's got a ridiculous listenership. So maybe I should have it right now. Maybe I should have it labeled. And maybe I should have people on afterwards, and maybe I should do some extra fact checking. I thought it was the best non-apology, explainology of an apology, because he did say, I'm sorry if you don't like it. But he did kind of say that he would do better. And then Daniel Ek said, and then I'll let you guys comment. Daniel Ek said, listen, we produce shows and we approve guests for The Ringer and for Gimlet, which we own those studios. We license Joe Rogan. We don't do any editing on his show, and we will remove ones after the fact, but it's a licensing deal. Therefore, we're not a publisher. I'm curious what you thought, Friedberg, on the non-apology and culpability for someone like Joe Rogan having guests on who are anti-vax or, maybe are debatable in terms of science, because, he is a comedian, but as he says, the show's kind of big now, so maybe I should do a little fact checking. What do you think he should do when he has scientists and people on?
I'll make 2 points. One is, I don't think that journalism is regulated in the sense that, we have freedom of speech. So anyone can stand up and they can say, I have this belief, or I have discovered this fact. And you may not actually hold that belief, and that fact may not be true, but you're still allowed to stand up and say it, and you're still allowed to have someone come on and say it. And so I don't think that there's any disclosure obligation. He's putting on a show. It's the same as any news show or entertainment show. I don't think that there's a clear line or boundary. I mean, what the heck do we do here? We've all got opinions. We try and talk about the news. We talk about our perspectives on the future. What the heck is it that we're doing here? There's no kind of clear line there. So I don't think that he has any obligations to do anything he doesn't want to do, except if and when his audience tells him, or the listeners that he cares about tell him, his customers tell him, this is what we expect and want from you. And then he responds to his customers. That's the way the market works, and that's the way the enterprise system should work. I think the separate, bigger question here that's really important and worth noting, and I just want to speak about this for 1 second. All of the great internet companies started with this notion that they were creating democratization, that they were creating access to information that didn't exist, whether it's access to media or access to search results or access to content or whatever that may not have been available to you. And that was a driving force for the entrepreneurs and the founders that started all these businesses. And all of them had these very idealistic points of view that we're not going to censor, we're not going to take a point of view, we're not going to put our foot down and say what is and isn't going to be displayed or shown or made available to our users. We're going to let users choose what they want to get access to and what they want to hear and listen to. And in all these cases, from Google to YouTube to Twitter and now to Spotify, the idea of being just an access, a platform for access is proving to be wrong. All of them are de facto publishers. They ultimately have to make decisions about what they do and don't let on the platform. And de facto, if you let something on the platform, you're giving it permission, you're giving it a voice, you're giving it amplification, and you're giving it access. And so all of them are now getting caught up in this problem that I don't think anyone from Larry or Sergey or Jack Dorsey or Daniel Ek ever wanted to be in. They all wanted to be these democratization platforms. And now they're finding that there is no way to avoid being treated like a publisher. And a publisher has someone that's called an editor, and an editor decides what is and isn't put on that publishing platform, as has always been the case in old media. And now in new media, they're all kind of stumbling into this problem, and they're not set up for it. And it's creating issues where people on the right are saying you're censoring us, and people on the left are saying you're not giving us access to information we want. And it's, it's just kind of I think the transition that none of them expected, but we're all seeing happen.
Chamath, if Daniel Ek is giving $100 million to Joe Rogan, can he claim, listen, it's just we're a platform when, we're on Spotify as well, but they don't pay us. Doesn't it change the relationship when they give him the $100 million? Or can Daniel say, intellectually, honestly, hey, listen, we're not responsible for this. I mean, they're backing up the Brinks truck and they're promoting it like heck. Are they a publisher or not in your mind?
I read yesterday that Barack and Michelle Obama's deal with Spotify just expired and they're going to shop it. I suspect that somebody will pay them tens of millions of dollars to produce content. That's not illegal. And it's a sign of a free market that's working. Spotify has a business to run, and that business is to get content in front of the users that are paying them a lot of money on a monthly basis to get access to that stuff. And so who are we to say how Spotify should run their business? I think you have a choice. Neil Young expressed his choice. There was a person in the New York Times, she took her podcast off of Spotify.
Yep.
There are subscribers that probably left, but then there are also subscribers that probably joined.
Yep. And paid. Yeah.
And paid. And so the reality is that's the free market being allowed to choose and being allowed to vote with their feet. And I think that all sides of that are in the right. So I think Spotify should be allowed to run their business. I think Joe Rogan should be allowed to say what he wants. If Spotify chooses to put a disclaimer in front of that podcast, that's their right, and that's good too. And if Joe Rogan decides that he wants to have, point counterpoint across podcasts or within a podcast, that's laudable as well, and that should be his decision. But I don't think people should be forced to make these decisions by law, because I think we get into a very slippery slope because you don't totally understand the incentives of the lawmaker there.
And we have a free market, as you're pointing out, Shamat. The free market is working perfectly.
And
there's a lot of people who don't like this free market.
More important than the free market, we have a founding document of principles that we all agree to.
Yes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't agree to it.
That says we have a right.
If you're talking about the First
here we
Amendment,
go. Let's go to our constitutional attorney, counselor. Take us there.
If you're talking about the principle of free speech, there's a lot of people who don't believe in it. That's the problem. First of all, you have this geriatric hippie.
Whoa.
Can I finish? Let me finish my rant, Jake, then you can get in, okay?
Rant away.
You got this geriatric hit.
I love Neil Young.
No, you know what happened here? Wait, sorry, Sax, just there. That was J. Cal saying, oh shit, he's going to get a Bellcaster clip, and he got tilted.
Clip. I got to interrupt.
He had to interrupt you there. That's really brutal, J. Cal. That's not being a good friend.
I thought you were talking about Joe Biden.
Can I explain? Can I actually explain what happened? Because I think, frankly, you guys are completely missing it. The wheel of censorship broke on Joe Rogan this week. They tried to Alex Jones him and it failed, okay? First, you have this geriatric hippie, Neil Young, who somehow has turned into a narc. And he plants a flag and he tries to get all these people behind him. And the very online crowd says, yes, we got to cancel Rogan. And then you got Jen Psaki from the White House weighing in, bringing in the coercive power of the administration on the side of censorship, okay? And what happens? Rogan comes out with this non-apology, like you said, and he seems so reasonable. He's a guy who's inquisitive. He's on the side of just asking questions. He's on the side of balance. He says, yeah, look, I want to present both sides of the issue. And everybody was like, there is no reason to be censoring this guy. Rogan is an everyman. And if they would censor him, they would censor every man. And that is why there was an enormous backlash to it. And everybody has opposed this. And so I think this is the week that this ridiculous idea of censorship has broke. Now, it would be nice if everybody, to Shamat's point, did agree with this principle, but they don't. The fact of the matter is, J. Cal, that censorship is now the official position of the Democrat Party. And you see it in the poll numbers. There was a great tweet that
Glenn Greenwald
posted where he showed the polling numbers on this. So, okay, you go back to the days of the Obama administration, both Democrats and Republicans agreed that the U.S. government and tech companies should not get involved in this type of censorship. But today, there's been a bifurcation. Democrats or lean Democrats versus Republicans who lean Republicans. It's 65-28 in favor of government taking steps to restrict info online. And it's 76-37 Democrats versus Republicans on tech companies. So
bonkers.
The First Amendment is no longer a consensus, and that is fundamentally the issue.
Scary.
But I got to tell you, I think there is a backlash against this. And I think that most of the country now, and I think this is where they went too far, is that Rogan is not Alex Jones. He's not Trump. He's not Milo Yiannopoulos. He seems like a reasonable guy. He is the biggest figure in independent journalism. He gets 11 million viewers every week. And I think there's a lot of people, especially young people, who are going, this has gone too far. And by the way, I do not think Obama ever would have made this political blunder of effectively denouncing Rogan, because Obama tried to appeal to young voters. And I think Jen Psaki, by putting the administration on the side of the censorship, they've made a huge mistake. And the same week, we saw that Tucker Carlson now gets more young Democrats listening to his show than CNN and MSNBC. And I'm telling you, this is the reason why.
Okay, Henry, you can put in the roaring crowd applause at this point.
The best
You've
thing
got
that I
big
saw.
problems. I'm telling you, Jake, you got big problems.
I'm an independent. Stop
you
making
got
me
big problems in the Democratic
I'm an independent.
Party. There are now more Tucker Democrats, okay, than among the key young demographic.
In your writer's room Democrats. Or on Tucker's writer room? Which
I'm a Tucker Democrat, Jake.
You're a Tucker. You are. You love Obama. You love Clinton. I think what's happening is that, and Chamath, you've said this over and over again.
Chamath?
I'm sorry. Chamath Palihapitiya. You had on one side, the right lost their mind in the alt-right. Now they've come a little bit more center. And then you now have the Democrats have lost their minds. The fact that anybody can't look at Joe Rogan and say, he's a comedian. He worked on a show where they fed people shakes of blended insects, Fear Factor, and he's taking mushrooms. And he's like, why are you taking me so seriously?
Well, wait,
I think understand.
Hold on. I think you're being super dismissive of Joe Rogan. I think he's actually, as Zach said, a pretty reasonable, curious person. And then, he does the stuff that everybody else does. But he doesn't prepare
for the show. He literally said, I don't prepare for the show. I don't do any preparation.
Maybe he does or maybe he doesn't.
No, he said explicitly he doesn't. And he fact checks in real time. So you got to keep your expectation at a certain level with Joe Rogan, I think.
I think that
that's not a dig.
I think that that's implausible to believe. I know that that's what he said, but you know, 11 million people a week, $100 million deal. I do suspect that he does some sort of preparation. I don't think he's completely winging it. Okay.
He literally said he wings it, but okay.
I understand that. Yeah. But I think that's not the point.
Okay.
Okay. The point is whether he prepares or not. The excuse isn't, sorry, the dog ate my homework. It's, hey, listen, I have a right to have this guy on my show, just like I have the right to have this other guy on my show. You can listen to both and then you can decide for yourself.
You could change the channel.
Okay. That's the important point. So Jason, I would not try to make this whole argument about whether he was prepared or unprepared as the excuse. It's whether you believe there's a fundamental right to free speech or whether you believe that people who disagree can disavow people and get them canceled and get them kicked off air.
I obviously don't agree. I don't agree anybody should be canceled. I think he should keep going.
Whatever Rogan's level of preparation, which I think is actually pretty high, the people who are accusing him of putting out misinformation are far more guilty of it themselves. And I think one of the best points in Rogan's non-apology, as you called it, is he said, listen, a lot of the things that we used to consider misinformation are now the truth. For example,
we've talked about it on the show. Yeah.
Well, we've been ahead of the curve in calling all this stuff out. We could have been accused of misinformation. So examples, the lab leak theory used to be considered misinformation. The cloth mask not doing anything. Listen, Dan Bongino was kicked off YouTube 2 weeks before the CDC for saying that Dan Bongino, he's a pretty big conservative commentator. Okay. He's got an audience of millions. You can be dismissive, but a lot of people like him. Yeah. Jake Hal. But look, my point is he was kicked off YouTube for saying cloth masks don't work. Then the CDC comes out 2 weeks later and says the same thing.
Right. I think that's a valid point. Yeah.
Well, it's the key point.
I personally